All right. Hello, welcome everybody to today's Sigstore office hours. We've had a time change here in North America, so apologies if it's a bit later in your time zone, but also hopefully you can catch the recording, which will be up on our YouTube channel. The main demo we have today is Josh Delitsky is joining us to highlight some of the features in Cosine 2.0, specifically OCI referrers. But as ever, folks, do feel free to throw in any other business or questions, Q&A, and we can get to those after. But yeah, let's jump right into it. Thank you, Josh, for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Great. I'll hand over to you. Are you sharing stuff? I can stop sharing and you can take over.
Let me know if you can see.
Yep.
Awesome. Hello. So for those that don't know me, I'm Josh Delitsky. I work with Tracy at ChainGuard. I am one of the maintainers inside the OCI group, which oversees all the specifications that Cosine and registries and different registry clients use to talk to one another. One of the big changes that's been going on over the last year is trying to kind of solidify the ways in which different things in a registry are attached to one another. So Cosine kind of has been hugely popular in doing this already. But if you know anything about the kind of the underlying way in which Cosine works, it's a little bit hacky because it builds on top of the limited support that OCI has to do these things. So starting last year, a group of people within OCI got together to kind of specify sort of some of the stuff that Cosine and other tools were doing. And in Cosine 2.0, we actually now have sort of experimental support for using OCI 1.1 APIs, which I'll go into in detail on this call. At any point, like I don't know how informal this meeting is, but you can stop me at any point and I'm happy to
extremely informal.
Okay, happy to like completely change directions or talk OCI history. Actually, I take that back. I don't want to do that. But yeah, so I'll jump right in. This my browser is open to a blog where I wrote about all of this, so I put that in the notes. But basically, everything I'm about to show is in that blog post. So. Let's get started. So, and I will be just like referencing things from this blog to do here. So I have two registries running here. Okay. And one of them is the like typical Docker registry that also known as distribution CNCF project. And this does not support the new APIs. And then another one called Zot, which is a open source project from Cisco that does support these new APIs. One of the things to mention is that the new APIs aren't released yet. We're working on that, but they're basically just about ready, and I don't want to say it can be relied on, but the parts that Cosine is using in the 2.0 release is the parts that everyone seems to be agreeing on. So they're safe. They're safe-ish. But like just to show, so if you were to, let's say you want to attach an SBOM with Cosine without OCI 1.1, we can look at what that looks like. So I'm going to copy an image into the registry that does not have support. And we will call it cosine demo 1. Okay, and then we're going to create a very useful SBOM here, just a fake JSON file right now. And then we're going to do cosine attach SBOM. And we will attach it to this new image. Okay, so if you look at the tags now on this image, you see it has this .sbom. So if you've been using cosine for a long time, you're probably used to these tags that have this .sbom suffix. And if we look a little closer at what that looks like, you can see this is an OCI image manifest, and it kind of in every way looks like it could be a container image, with the exception of the layer here is not a container tarball. It's instead a SPDX or SBOM in JSON format, and that's why it's so small. And this works today, and cosine has optimized for reaching as many registries as possible. So this is the approach that's been taken. But one of the things that's problematic with that is that you'll end up in your registry with a bunch of these .sbom tags. The same is true with .sig and .att for signatures and attestations. So if you look at your registry listing, you'll just see, depending on how much you push SBOMs and signatures and attestations, you'll end up with a ton of these. So people in OCI were basically like, this is this is terrible. It does work, and obviously cosine wouldn't be where it's at today if it didn't work well. But ideally, you shouldn't have to put them into the tags, and that's just a function of OCI 1.0 only allows you to do so much. So one of the changes in OCI 1.1 is if a registry, instead of doing this and adding new SBOMs for each different attachment, let's see if I'm just going to do a different image here just to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to attach the same SBOM to this new tag in the same repo. And now you can see I have, instead of just I should ideally just have latest and busybox and attachments, but now I have two SBOMs which are pointing to each of these respectively. So in OCI 1.1, the decision was made, let's try to, if we're gonna use tags, use at most one tag. And so I'll show you the new support in cosine to enable that. So the new tag is called the, let me pull up my handy blog post. I already forget. refers digest schema tag, or the fallback tag, people call it. So I'm going to turn on the OCI experimental flag. Without this, we will not attempt, or Cosine will not attempt to attach this new format. So it's kind of opt-in right now. And let's copy another one to cosine demo 2. And this should just have the one latest tag right now. Okay, so now if we try an attachment with the experimental flag on, and also this long flag that Zach and I came up with called registry refers mode, this basically opts you into using the OCI 1.1 refers tag schema instead of creating the .sbom tag. So you need both experimental and this flag to use this behavior. And if I do this, and now list my tags, notice that it's very similar, but it doesn't have .sbom at the end of it. Let's copy a busybox again. And we'll attach the same SBOM to the busybox one. Okay, maybe bad demo. Let's see. That's not what I was trying to show. Okay, so let's say you attach a different SBOM to the same image. Right. Okay, so in the past, like this would, in cosine, overwrite the old .sbom tag, and now we have instead, we still just remain one extra tag per thing that's being attached to. And if you look at what this looks like, I'm just guessing that DB is the first one, the latest tag, but we could be wrong. So now, instead of having an OCI manifest for these tags, we kind of push it up one level and use an index. The index allows us to collect multiple different attachments. So now we can actually attach multiple SBOMs to the same image by using the index format. And we're not going to get extra tags for adding new things. This will also be used for signatures. This will also be used for attestations. The one thing to note is that it can be parsed as an image index, but it's really meant for this referencing API. And you'll notice this new field that's new in OCI 1.1 called artifact type. Artifact type is, it maps to, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, just a question about the new, I guess the index is what this is. Mm-hmm. So I guess on which end is this being constructed? Is it that the server now knows, like, oh, hey, I've got another artifact that references the same OCI thing, so I'm going to update this index, or is the client sort of pulling down the old one and appending to it and pushing that up in this case?
No, it's a fantastic question. So I said at the beginning here, I have two registries running. The one on port 5001 doesn't support new APIs. I'm going to do a demo. I'm going to do a follow-up to this with using the one on 5002, which does support it. This index and this tag will always be created by the client. So yes, cosign is basically when it's attaching a new thing. And here, I'll just to show you. I can do the exact same manifest, and I should have 3 now. So cosign is pulling it down, getting the response, appending the thing, pushing it back up. So this does have the potential for race conditions if you have like 2 CI legs trying to attach at the same time. There is like something in the spec called the ETAG header, which is attempting to mitigate race conditions, but obviously it's not ideal. But to answer your original question, the client is responsible for creating and pushing back this tag to the registry. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Awesome. So like I was saying before, this is called the fallback tag for a reason. So we'll see in a minute how we can do this completely without tags, and the server becomes responsible for this response. 2 things I'll show really quick before doing that.
Can I ask something just before you move on?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, this seems cool. So like if you had a Cyclone DX SBOM and an SPDX SBOM, then they'd both go in this file, and you just have the one. In previous versions, what would happen? Would you have multiple .SBOM, and you'd have to figure out which was which?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually brings up a good point that these types are defined by cosign. So technically, you know, if it came down to it, we could have a separate type for different SBOM types. But right now it's going by basically the old attachment types. So .SBOM, .signature.
Okay.
But yes, like to answer the second part of your question, yes, you can basically attach multiple things by pumping them into this index instead of the tag listing.
Yep. Cool.
So I wish I didn't push the busy box because it makes it look. It should just be 2 tags basically.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. That answers it.
Awesome. 2 other things I want to comment on before moving on to the new hotness is if you look at, so the artifact type is a really interesting new thing. So you've probably heard the term OCI artifacts like all over the internet in this space for a long time. And it's a very like murky word. OCI 1.1, without really saying it, has sort of solidified artifacts in the same way that Helm and WebAssembly and Open Policy Agent and all these projects have been already doing this, which cosign basically opted not to do. So cosign now, with this experimental flag, will be pushing things in the same way as Helm. If you look at what this manifest actually looks like. Ugh. So you'll notice that instead of config media type OCI image config, you now have config media type something something cosine. And this maps to artifact type in this response. And so basically, this is a way of using an image manifest through OCI and saying, wait, actually, it's an artifact. Config media type is something other than VND OCI image.config. Like I said, this is the way that Helm has done it in a way like that was sort of not supported by the spec, and now with 1.1 it will be supported. There's a little bit of debate about a new media type altogether, which would change this to something like OCI image artifact, but it's kind of confusing about what the real value add is there when all clients already support this. So that's been kind of the holdup of getting the release out, just full disclosure. But I don't think even if that's the case, cosine will go that route because it's hard enough to get this type of thing working in different registries. So that's been the holdup. But now you see the layers here, it's the same as before, SPDX JSON. If we were attaching a Cyclone DX, it would change to that just in the same way. Like I was saying, we could have, cosine could opt to have a different artifact type per SPON type if desired. What's nice about this is clients can filter on artifact type. So you can say like, give me only the SPONs, give me only the signatures. One of the caveats of this is this file technically can only be 4 megabytes, which sounds high. But like that's kind of what you get for using this fallback behavior. Hopefully you never reach that. Lastly, before moving on, there is a new field. So the other new field that has been introduced in the new version of OCI 1.1 is subject. And this is how references are achieved server side, which I'll get into in a second. But this basically says this manifest points to or references this image, and this image is one of the ones here. So this is the latest, I think. Any questions before I move on to the new API? Okay, so this Port 5002, I have a whole different registry running in Docker. It's a project called Zot. The Zot team has been kind of like super involved in the OCI 1.1 kind of like release, and they're kind of like on the bleeding edge. So this this registry supports these new APIs. So we will basically do the same demo, but just change from 5001 to 5002. So copy an image in, and we will attach an SBOM. We're going to use the registry refers mode, and the experimental flag is still on. And what's the cosine debug flag? Dash capital D.
I forget, sorry.
Anyway, well, lowercase d or dash dash v. That's brilliant. Okay,
Yeah, dash dash verbose or dash D for short.
I actually won't do it on this one. So okay, so we're attaching it, but port 5002. Okay, same exact thing, but cosine basically will not create that new tag.
Josh, you're muted.
Hello? Good? Okay. All right, I don't know if you caught that, but basically we attached an SBOM to a new image here that's running on the registry that has support for new APIs. And after listing it, you can see that there's still only a latest tag. So how do we get the SBOM? We can still download the SBOM, and here's where I'll turn on the -G flag. So we have our hello world here. And the way that it does that is it hits a new API defined by the spec called refers. So instead of using tags, it uses a whole new API, which is dynamically returning the index response. So here's the response. I'll try to like JQify this. And notice, not sure why I got 2 there, but maybe I hit the command twice. But yeah, basically, oh no, that's something else. Let's just curl this URL ourselves and see what happens. This one. Okay, so this /refers is a brand new API. Okay, and you can notice that this is the exact same as the fallback tag, which is why they're compatible. The client should only need to parse one or the other. And same thing, it has artifact type and all this. The difference is this is not posted as a separate tag. And we don't do that because cosine basically sees, oh, you support this API. And it does that by just heading that endpoint. And it just will not do that fallback tag. So this is kind of a path forward for attaching things in the registry without abusing the tagging API. That's pretty much the demo. I can dive into this in some other direction, or dive deeper into the spec if people want, but let me know.
You've summoned B Mitch.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
no.
thanks for that, Josh. That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
If no one else has a question, I would like you to talk through the sort of plan for migration. So like right now, this is gated. It's an experimental feature, so no one's going to be stumbling into this by accident. But how do you envision in the future cosine using the new refers API? And this is a question I kind of already know the answer to, but I think it's worth talking through.
Well, I would actually ask you the same, and also Brandon Mitchell just joined, who is the absolute expert on everything I just talked about. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say whether. Brandon, go ahead. I don't know.
I just jumped on, so I'm
What
still
is the
catching up.
plan for migrating? So I just showed the new cosine with fallback tag and also refers API. what is the plan for migration going from .sbon, .att, .sig to using refers API all the way?
It's kind of complicated because we've got something that's not the refers API. We've got the refers API in the fallback state and the refers API once you actually have the API out there. And so I don't think there's a built-in upgrade path to go from the .sig files to the fallback refers API that we've got.
Yeah, so there is I think we were doing the right thing on reading, which is sort of like we'll use the new API if it's around. If not, we'll fall back. But and I think that's the most important thing, is that we don't all of a sudden lose your old signatures. It does mean that when you're writing stuff, we have to be a little bit careful about how we do that and whether we like migrate stuff forward. But I think the important thing is that we're pretty permissive on reads, and then hopefully the registries will start supporting this. All our clients doing verification will start supporting this, and then after realistically years, we'll feel comfortable turning this behavior off by default and making it a backwards compatibility only thing. Zach is I guess Zach, what's the question or whatever?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say this is great. We know that people are going to have a lot of different things they want to attach to their builds related to build provenance or other like SDLC type stuff. And so it's great that we're supporting the ability to add multiple things. And it's also great that we're not doing so in a way that is causing sort of like this proliferation of tags in your registry. Maybe this is a nitpick, but I was noticing that the media type is cosine specific. And so I was thinking ahead to when I would be writing like a deploy controller, and I would be fetching an artifact, and then I might want to fetch the SBOM, maybe a VEX documents, other sort of things. And I was wondering if all those artifacts would be sort of like tooling specific in their media type, or like would my deploy controller need to be aware of sort of what tool I was using to associate all these build artifacts together, or is there any possibility where it could be more like agnostic? And this is asked out of ignorance of sort of like how the broader collaboration works between all the different parties involved in OCI.
So I'll say that is a point of mass contention right now in OCI. So stepped right into that landmine field there. The goal that we're trying to get to is we'd like to have these somewhat standardized. So if you're pulling a Cyclone DX SBOM, you know what their Cyclone DX SBOM media type is, and you can pull that. There's work to be done on our side, though, to still get that cleaned up a little bit.
We often see a delineation sort of between like the open source use case and the industry use case. So if you're a company, you can kind of like mandate, okay, this is the tool that's being used, and then you can, update all of your tooling to be aware of that tool. But in cases where we see open source components built on other open source components, it's not always possible to know what tooling your immediate dependencies use, let alone your entire build graph, of course.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I've been pushing for a while to try to get some more standardization in there. And there was a pushback of saying, no, that should just be whoever's writing the tool should do it themselves. And I think OCI is starting to see why that was a bad thing to say, because we're starting to throw stuff over the fence to them, and they're starting to yell back that all looks terrible. I'm like, told you. So I think that's why we're in the middle of the minefield right now. So we'll get to the other side and hopefully have something that looks a little bit more standardized at that point.
Thank you for continuing to think about this problem.
It's not easy to continue.
Great. Any more questions, comments, minefields?
I just want to, I guess one more time make a comment and say thanks, Brendan and Josh, for thinking through all these things, and it's really exciting to see this landing in Cosign. And it's one of these things that's like, does it actually help the users? Not directly, but it is actually going to enable a bunch of really cool use cases that weren't possible before, and it's going to make everything so much more reliable and clean. And we have been plagued by issues from people saying things like, oh, like every Cosign signature download shows up in my download statistics. So now the registry thinks that signed images are twice as popular as unsigned images, which is all wrong. So stuff like that. There's a million little things that are going to get better because of this. So I'm looking forward to all those benefits.
Yeah, last thing I guess I'll add is like this is very much in progress, and the reason why it's behind experimental, well, both OCI is in progress, hopefully not for too much longer, but also the cosign side. So this only supports signing and SBOMs. Maybe other things work, but I don't think so. So if you're interested in kind of like taking this closer to the finish line, there's need to kind of refactor some of the code, make this work for attestations, basically any other type of attachment that isn't SBOM and signature. So I don't know if there's a good place to like document the status of this. I just wanted to make people aware that it is experimental for a reason, but would like to get feedback on it.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the best place to document the status is on an issue titled like proposed plan for OCI refers integration. So it's not a very descriptive issue. But I think if you search for referrers in the cosign issues, you'll find it.
I will say, in addition to keeping experimental, just knowing that we're changing stuff upstream, also Docker Hub and I just learned the other day Harbor are both pushing back against supporting this out of the box until OCI finishes things out in GA. So if you're trying to push to either of those, it won't work yet.
Cool. Okay, thanks very much, Josh and Brendan, for all the work here and for the demo. Great. Okay. Yeah, I think that brings us to, I'm not seeing anything else in the agenda. Does anyone want to bring up any other business, Q&A? Okay. I think then we can leave it there. Next week is the community meeting, and in 2 weeks we'll be having another office hours. Actually, Nick, who's on the call here, he'll be talking about clearly defined and Sigstore. So also looking forward to that in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye.